The following video contains spoilers, so if you haven't done the newest 6.2 Pandaemonium content, and you're just a cute little sprout, get out of here, you! You're gonna get spoiled! But if you're sticking around, let's take a ride to Crazy Theory Town. So, when Final Fantasy XIV's post 6.0 information was released way back when, we were told the new raid series would be Pandaemonium, and it would have something, according to this key art, to do with our old nemesis, La Habrea. Now, if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV and are just kind of here to watch, La Habrea is one of the Ascians who has been a thorn in our side since A Realm Reborn. He's kind of, as the kids say, a complete asshole. For lore purposes, the Ascians are just this secret group of evildoers who work behind the scenes for much of the game to manipulate others, usher in various calamities, and eventually resurrect their god Zodiark. There are many of them, but the three big ones are Emet-Selch, Elidibus, and La Habrea. La Habrea being the one that takes up most of our early time in the game. Like I said, huge asshole. But at the end of the first expansion, Heavensward, La Habrea finally gets what's coming to him and is killed by his own machinations when Elf Pope over there gains the power of King Thoradin and turns it against him. And that is where his story ended. Or so we thought. In the years since, we've dealt with Elidibus and Emet-Selch, we've learned of the Ascians' motivations and their history, we learned of their connections to the origins of the world, how we're but one of 14 shards of an original perfect existence, and how the Ascians are really just kinda homesick. It's less that they're outright evil, and more that they just think they're doing what's right to try and bring back their friends, which in a way is all of us. We're pieces of the people they once knew. In fact, by the time we get to the conclusion of Endwalker, we've traveled to the past, we've seen our villains as just kind of normal people living their lives. So it would be pretty safe to say that the fan base has developed kind of a soft spot for them. But man, that La Habrea, somehow, out of all of them, he's the only one who didn't really get any kind of true backstory. He's still always been kind of that asshole. So when after Endwalker, Elidibus calls us to return to the past and venture into Pandaemonium, this sort of prison for failed experiments, a place we've been told La Habrea is definitely involved with, you know some wacky is about to go down lore-wise, and I am always here for wacky. The story of Pandaemonium so far is that in our current timeline, during a routine observation of the Ethereal Sea, a researcher named Claudian recovers a strange crystal shard very similar to the ones we've seen the Ascians possess before. It is clearly made, not formed, and contains power beyond that of any normal-ass magic crystal in Final Fantasy. But more importantly, it is a blank blue crystal. Just keep that in mind for later. So when Claudian becomes a little obsessed and then eventually starts hearing strange voices and his colleagues do not, we work with them to figure out why. In doing so, we learn that Elidibus of the past needs our help with the prison research lab facility called Pandaemonium that has been taken over by something, and it's turning its key wards, the guards, into monsters in order to protect whatever is happening inside, freeing the experiments and creatures chained within as well. The big problem, of course, is that La Habrea is supposed to be the one keeping an eye on the place. And the very first boss we fight literally has La Habrea's mask as part of its design. So the community was already excited for what this could mean, especially when you defeat it and it turns out to be a normal man named Ericthonius, who the fan base, I think we can all now agree on, at the time thought was 100% going to somehow end up being our La Habrea. A quick note to those of you who are new to Final Fantasy XIV, La Habrea, Emet-Selch, Elidibus, etc. Those are all just titles. I know it sounds crazy, it kinda is. So the thought process was that eventually Ericthonius would take on the role, the title of La Habrea, and that this raid series would be the story that explained how. And ironically, we were now working with the guy who would eventually become one of our greatest foes. A fun plot twist to be sure, but I think one that is now totally debunked. Because, as we come to find out, Ericthonius' father is in fact La Habrea, and he and his son do not get along very well due to a past with his mother that we will come to understand more about in 6.2. Speaking of 6.2 in this current patch, while Elidibus is working with you to investigate Pandaemonium, Ericthonius is attacked by this strange creature that resembles one of the enemies from a previous boss fight that we've done, but that claims to be his father, La Habrea. But before we can do anything, the real La Habrea shows up to save us. The fake, we come to find out, is known as Hephaestus, and we discover that it's actually some kind of twisted version of a younger La Habrea, Hephaestus being his real name at the time. But the question is, of course, Why does he exist? Well, we learn over the course of the raid series that Erichthonius' fallout with his father was over the death of his mother, and the cold nature of his father ever since. But it's revealed through the raid that La Habrea is hiding the truth of his mother and her death from the boy. Turns out his mom, Athena, was actually a brilliant but obsessed researcher trying to discover the secrets of life and potentially transcendence to godhood. Because while the ancient Ascians can do a lot, like they have the power to create life, there is a difference between making life and making a soul. And that is what she was obsessed over. But it was a young La Habrea, Hephaestus, that formulated the theory that a person could meld with the creation, giving it a soul, and the two would become something greater than its parts. Athena insisted on developing this idea further, and it was in working together that the two fell in love. When Pandaemonium was built, Athena would lead the team of researchers, and it was this that caused our current troubles. Her passion turned to obsession and an eventual plot, according to La Habrea, to use her son in her experiments. When La Habrea attempts to stop her, she offers him a glimpse into her soul, to merge with her, become part of her, and she become part of him. La Habrea does this in the hopes of discovering if she ever even loved him, or was just using him this entire time. His answer, of course, is not the one he's looking for, and in a rage, rips the emotional part of his soul away so that nothing but duty and loyalty for his people remain, and he seals the rest in a crystal. But Athena, in secret, created a vessel to contain part of the soul La Habrea ripped away, the one we have met and fought, the emotional part of him that would do anything for his wife, the part that even now acted to bring her back in some way to complete her work. This is why La Habrea was so cold to his son, but it doesn't explain one thing: why the La Habrea we have known for years doesn't really seem like this one. Keep that in mind. So at the end of this raid series, we battle evil Hephaestus, and together La Habrea and Erichthonius seal him away in a crystal once again. The truth is revealed, the two make amends, and La Habrea takes the crystal with him. But strangely, when wishing to know more, La Habrea tells Erichthonius to drop it. And so he does, because he accepts his dad is who he is, but it is kind of suspicious. However, everything seems fine, and you return to the present, only to discover that researcher Claudian, drawn by the voice, has gone missing in Ascian, conveniently the floating continent where La Habrea met his end. And at the same time, in the ethereal sea, Pandaemonium reappears. What could it all mean? What happens next? Well, it's theory time. I think it's safe to say Erichthonius isn't, as we all thought, going to be La Habrea. But it could be that Claudian is the shard of Erichthonius. That's why he hears the voices and the others do not. He appears to look similar to him, and why he's being directed to Ascian. Is he, much like Erichthonius, being used again? But by who? Athena? How? Why? Well, could the death of Athena have been a lie? In bonding with La Habrea, could part of her have permanently attached to him? That was her research goal after all, bonding souls to become something stronger. Perhaps this dark side that La Habrea ripped away is the part that contained Athena as well. And the evil Hephaestus' objective in the raid is to bring her back, and maybe that's due to her influence within him. So when La Habrea takes the crystal with him at the end, and doesn't destroy his emotional side like he intended to do, perhaps he opens himself up to be corrupted by Athena once more. Could this explain the difference between La Habrea of the past and the one that we've known since A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Ward? The La Habrea who was manipulative and devious and impulsive to the point where the other Ascians like Emmett Selk would speak ill of him later on, and we're told he really cared little for the other Ascians' plans. The La Habrea we know moved from body to body, taking on new forms, and even at one point merging with another Ascian to fight you. Could it be because it was never actually La Habrea Hephaestus, but La Habrea Athena that we've battled? Could she somehow have been in control the entire time? And that's not even my craziest theory. Let's dive into the deep end. Is that blank crystal which Claudian found, that is clearly La Habrea's color, the man we knew as the good La Habrea trying to reach out and warn Claudian, the shard of his son? Or is it blank because it's fake, created by Athena, and the warning is a trap? And what of Erichthonius? When Erichthonius and his father are discussing the history of his relationship with Athena, and La Habrea mentions how they fell in love, Erichthonius replies, "I take it I was born not soon after." And then there is this long Very awkward pause. Even your character picks up on something being off. When we see the vision of La Habrea confronting Athena, she mentions that he has never come down to see her in the lab. Yet, we are told that she spends all of her time there. So what relationship would her son have had with her that he would have cared so much? Sure, he was assigned to work at Pandaemonium due to his mother, according to the story, but I say there is something potentially amiss with this history. Taking a dip into the world of Greco-Roman myth, which, to be clear, all of these ancient Ascians are either named after a Greek or Roman mythological figure, and also bugs for some reason, sometimes both. And Erichthonius, according to Greek myth, was born from the earth, a concept being known as an autochthon, if you want to look that up. And then he was adopted and raised by Athena. Note here, she never gives birth to Erichthonius. In fact, in the myth, Hephaestus tries to get a little too close to Athena and she's not feeling it, but you know, his baby juice, we'll say, ends up on her and she's like, nope! And the stuff hits the earth and becomes Erichthonius. That is the nicest way I can tell that story. But an interesting factoid from all of this is that Erichthonius roughly translates to troubles born of earth. So follow me here. What if Erichthonius isn't a child born of Athena and Hephaestus, but a simulacrum created in their quest to master life and the soul? Her entire objective is to create something called a hemithoi or hemithia, which it's described by Homer as sort of a Greek mythological version of a demigod or a semi-divine hero. She's trying to create a super-powered Ascian, and Erichthonius does appear to have some interesting powers. Could this be why Athena specifically needs him for her research? To the point where evil Hephaestus kidnaps him? But again, why him specifically? Maybe because Athena and La Habrea combined to make him, but not in a genetic way, but sort of a magical, we combined our essences to bring this child to life way. Evil Hephaestus even says, Erichthonius is mine, heart and soul. In the vision of their meeting, we see Erichthonius in the background, hanging in the air, unconscious, and as La Habrea and Athena merge, Erichthonius is glowing the same blue color they do. What's even wilder is after La Habrea announces that he must kill Athena to prevent her from doing more damage, she seems pretty okay with it, remarking that she's fine that he's the one doing it. Does she have a backup plan similar to the body created for La Habrea's darker half? Is it possible that the other part of Athena, the one that evil Hephaestus wants to bring back to life, has been inside Erichthonius this whole time? And that's why he feels the way he does for his mother. Her entire research seemed to be focused on this idea of combining two people and the creation of vessels to store these new souls in. And we see this again and again in the story as time progresses, and as this technology is either rediscovered or secretly introduced by Ascians, like the Allegans and their quest to create clones. Interestingly enough, La Habrea dies in the Allegan Etherochemical Research Facility. Could in some way Athena still be there, luring the shard of her other half to her in order to become whole once again? An obvious final boss of Pandaemonium, which has conveniently been brought forward through the ethereal sea to our time. And we haven't even talked about the La Habrea mask that first appears on Erichthonius when he's the first boss of the raid tier. Erichthonius even says himself, as you may have noticed during our battle, La Habrea's mask crowns me when I've transformed. It is said that we manifest in a way that reflects our innermost selves. I had thought that mask a symbol of the chains that bound my heart, but recent events have caused me to reconsider that assumption. And then there's his belt, which was given to him by his father, that has the full symbol of Mateus from Final Fantasy XII, named after Mateus, the Emperor of Hell from Final Fantasy II, the same emperor who summons Pandaemonium in that game, and has a light and dark half. Hell, the raid tier is called Abyssos. The Abyss is another name for Hell. I mean, there's just so many clues here, which is why I'm gonna leave you with this last tidbit. In the background of the lab where we fight evil Hephaestus, there are these sort of DNA helix symbols. One is red, one is blue, and we know that the crystal you collect from evil Hephaestus is red, and La Habrea's is blue. Could this be a hint of the plot twist to come? If you think I'm way off, or you have a theory of your own, that's what the comments are for. I'd love to see what you think below. I really enjoy theory crafting with you all, even if I'm totally way off base. This is the first time I get to do this. I've been catching up with all y'all for the last 2 years. I'm finally here. I finally get to throw out some theories. This is great. I'm having a blast. Hopefully you are too. And I will see you next time with some more Final Fantasy XIV.